The next day, Yogi Bhajan again phoned me early in the morning that he had booked a hall in a university where he wanted me to address his followers on Baisakhi Gurpurb. He had fixed the lecture 2 hours before the one fixed by Dr. Shamsher Singh in American University. I agreed. There were about 65 American Sikhs, men and women. The arrangement was excellent and the atmosphere quiet and peaceful. After Kirtan, some young men and girls lectured the one and same theme, and all the lectures were virtually addressed to me. They said they were Khalsa and they loved the Khalsa discipline, but they felt very insecure because the Indian Sikhs did not properly appreciate them, and they have many other difficulties. In my lecture, I pointed out that Guru Gobind Singh made it clear in the very beginning that the path is not easy. It is difficult. In history, our brothers and sisters have endured so much persecution and cruelty that during the 18th century, there was not a single year when thousands of men and women and children did not have to lay down their lives for their faith. But they faced martyrdom because their minds and souls felt firm security in their faith and commitments to God and Guru Gobind Singh. American Sikhs feel insecure because their loyalty and commitments are divided. The moment their commitment is only to Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind Singh, all their fears will vanish. I then said, here I stand firmly committed to the ideals of Guru Gobind Singh. If because of my total commitment to God and my masters, all the Indian Sikhs of Washington and New York come even to stone me to death, I will not move an inch. I will stand firmly secure in my faith and commitment to Guru Gobind Singh. I then read from Rihatnamas of Bhai Daya Singh, Bhai Nand Lal, that a Khalsa should not practice any yoga asanas, yatras, mantras, or tantras. If they are Khalsa in mind and spirit, they should stick to the mystical disciplines of Adi Guru Granth alone. Then Yogi Bhajan spoke. Without trying to confront my views, he spoke to them in a tone different from his usual tone. We again parted as friends with considerable differences. Many American Sikhs who met me there and later at New York and Boston said that this Washington lecture was an eye-opener and very inspiring. It gave me the impression that most of the Americans in 3HO are eager to devote themselves mainly to Sikhism. Professor Balwant Singh attended this lecture and would bear witness to what I have said. In the evening, Yogi Bhajan gave us a dinner in a Chinese restaurant. I have described the discussion held at the dinner in the book. New York. I was in New York and wanted to meet Dr. Amya Chakravarti, Dr. Rama Chamswamy, and many other scholars. But for the 1 week I was to be there, the Sikh Sardars had already fixed a night in one of the 5 or 6 houses. No one spared his car or left me free to go where I liked. The whole week was very tiring and exhausting. Mrs. Rajendra Kaur, sister of Dr. Atamjit Singh of Delhi University, invited me to the 108th story restaurant on World Trade Center, from where the whole of New York can be seen as a thing of beauty. It was one of the finest evenings I have enjoyed in my Western tour. When the red glow of the sunset made New York not only look like a painting of Rembrandt, but at least for one evening concealed all the social and cultural ugliness of the city. I enjoyed the hospitality of Sardar Ujagar Singh and his noble wife, Gobind Kaur, Dr. Harbans Singh, Jagmohan Singh Sethi, and his wife, Anupma, From my hometown and Dr. Sadhu Singh Ahluwalia, I also met Gianni Gurdeep Singh, who expressed regret that while he was a grantee, he was able to arrange a collection of about $2,000 for Kehar Singh Vairagi, the Akali missionary who cannot deliver a sermon without taking wine. In a small gathering at Leamington in London, Kehar Singh Vairagi said in my presence, quote, "It is Dr. Trilochan Singh who persuaded us to continue agitation against Mrs. Gandhi's dictatorship. Otherwise, we were prepared to make a settlement with Gianni Zail Singh." End quote. Publicly, Kehar Singh had commended emergency, but his private views were in favor of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. This duplicity was not new to me. It was a shock to the people sitting there. I told Gianni Gurdeep Singh that I have always been helped by friends who understand me. Kehar Singh Vairagi was a politician and deserved help because he can render some favors. But what can a writer and scholar give beyond books and lectures? Pittsburgh. I was at Pittsburgh for a week and enjoyed the overwhelming hospitality of Dr. Sundar Singh Chowdhury and his devoted wife Kamal, Dr. M.S. Luthra and Dr. Damyanti, Dr. Surjit Singh and Dr. Ranjit Kaur, and Sardar Pritipal Singh, son of Sardar Lal Singh, Kamala Akali. Here also came friends from Cleveland and Detroit to extend an invitation, but I have not found time to visit these places. Pittsburgh, the industrial city of many bridges, is a beautiful place. About 106 that are here live at long distances from each other. Kingston, Boston, Hanover, Portland. At Kingston, I stayed with Professor Harbinslal, who had fixed some lectures at Rhode Island University. I enjoyed my stay with Professor Harbinslal very much. I had met him after many years and felt at home because he still maintained a deep interest in the affairs of Punjab, because he was disgusted with the behavior and politics of his old comrades of the Sikh Student Federation. This organization was created by the zeal of the young men and vagrant ambition of Akali leaders. It died because the leaders lost their character faster than even the Akali leaders. Some have become congressets, others informers of Congress rulers, and there are others who have perfected themselves in the art of telling lies on Akali stages by giving emotional speeches. Professor Harbonslal's Orthodox Hindu mother is always worried lest her son become a full-fledged Khalsa, although she is herself well-versed in Gurbani. Here I met some American Sikhs, Pritam Singh, his noble and generous wife, Gurdain Kaur, who sought Professor Harbonslal's advice about their embittered relations with Yogi Bhajan. What intrigued me most was that Professor Harbonslal was, on the one hand, encouraging Pritam Singh and Gurdain to stand on principles and not surrender to Yogi Bhajan's excesses, while on the other hand kept the Washington headquarters of Yogi Bhajan informed of Pritam Singh's activities. I think by doing this, he was creating considerable trouble for both the parties. Sometimes I have an uncanny feeling that wherever there are two groups, Professor Harbonslal is with every group and everybody, and yet really with none. Anyway, that makes him quite a well-known figure on the East Coast. He is everybody's good acquaintance and friend, but no one appears to take his friendship seriously. He is associated with every society on the East Coast, but rarely gives his wholehearted participation to any one. That, I think, is the safest and best position one can take, and also a very comfortable one. Although he did not care to send my mail, which came at his address in the end of April, and even opened it, he asked me on the phone towards the week of August when I was at Berkeley, quote, "What is your overall impression about Yogi Bhajan and 3HO? I said in reply, quote, "I have discussed my opinion with you in considerable detail while I was with you, and now I am writing my impression about everybody in my memoirs," end quote. At Boston, I delivered a lecture in the Boston University, which the professors and students enjoyed and ended with a fruitful discussion. At Hanover, I stayed with Dr. Manohar Singh Grewal, who, along with his wife, Jita, have done more than anyone else to be helpful. They have all along shown great concern for my health and well-being. They are highly respected both by the American Sikhs and the Sikh community in general for their integrity. I stayed at Portland with Pritam Singh and Gurdain Kaur, whose faith in the Sikh gurus certainly surpasses that of Yogi Bhajan and the best among his followers. He is young and very enthusiastic, and like all other American Sikhs, has much to learn. His wife Gurdain, a very pure and noble soul, equally devoted and committed to Sikhism, is a student of philosophy and music. Here I also met Gurdain's friend Lisa Davison, who is making a headway in her Sikh studies. The sincerity and devotion with which she is studying the Sikh scriptures and Punjabi language is remarkable, and her aim is to work among the Sikh women in the Punjab. I hope and pray the Guru grants her wishes. Modesto, Stockton, and Yuba City. I was about to leave for England after 6 weeks of tour on the East Coast when I suddenly received an invitation from the West Coast. After staying a night with Dr. Amarjit Singh Marwa at Los Angeles, I went to Modesto to stay for a couple of days with Professor Kirpal Singh Grewal and Pripet, his talented wife, where Magman Singh, an old patriot, met me and introduced me to many freedom fighters who are in their 80s and 90s. At Stockton, I lectured and met some local people and felt happy to meet Sardar Charanjit Singh, who in my opinion is the best organizer in this region. With very short notice, he arranged a lecture in a hall, hurriedly booked for the purpose in Fresno, and for about 3 hours there was lecture and healthy discussion. This is the one lecture I have enjoyed the most in the whole West Coast. Sardar Charanjit Singh invited some freedom fighters and their children to his house, and we discussed some important matters. At Yuba City, I found an opportunity to stay with Gurmeet Kaur, the daughter of my dearest friend in life, Dr. Gurdeep Singh, who died in the Japanese bombing in Burma. I was happy to note that dear Gurmeet has imbibed many of the virtues of her father, which other members of the family have completely missed. Her husband, Jagtar Singh, is a staunch Akali who talks about peaches in the daytime and about Dr. Jagjit Singh's Sikh state at night. And when he talks about the Sikh state, others dare not speak. I warned him that Dr. Jagjit Singh's opinions may change once he is back in Akali politics. I stayed for 2 days with Sardar Didar Singh Bains, a prominent farmer who is contributing much in his own way to Yuba City Sikh community. I was greatly impressed by the integrity and sincerity of his wife Shanti and her attempt to keep her children Punjabi in mind and spirit. I met the oldest freedom fighter, Takar Singh Tuli, and his son Kartar Singh Johar. While I was with him, Yogi Bhajan's phone rang and he kept on talking for 1.5 hours, offering me the same terms and even much more for a total deal with him of the kind he has done with Mohinder Singh and others. I angrily refused. Kartar Singh Johar was surprised to hear the whole discussion on the phone. I also met Sardar Ujagar Singh Chima and Bhagat Singh Tiara for a while. Next section is Los Angeles.